Pedro, how are you, man?
Hey James, how are you, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Thank you so much, mate, for jumping on.
Oh, mate, thank you very much for having me, bud.
Yeah, mate, to tell you the truth, you are without a doubt one of the most remarkable individuals I've ever met. You're one of the few people I think online, especially on social media, or considered a fitness influencer that really has that empathy, compassion towards other people. And I'd like to know from the start, mate, because people aren't born, they're made. And you've had a very sort of interesting upbringing and how you've sort of overcome adversity and struggles. But tell me a bit about your childhood, mate. Whereabouts did you grow up?
Oh, mate, first of all, thank you so much for those kind words, man. I really appreciate that, man. It's very humbling hearing it from someone like you. Bro, I was born in South Africa. My parents were born in Mozambique. They were there because my great grandparents and my mother's side were actually immigrated from Portugal to Mozambique because it used to be a Portuguese colony. My parents grew up there, but they had to flee Mozambique due to the problems they had there. They moved to South Africa. I was born there. I was raised there. I pretty much studied there up until I finished year 12, matric for South Africa. And then I went and did some university while I was there. I did psychology and law. But my upbringing, man, I suppose typical European parents, very strict, very disciplined, traditional in the sense of how we behave, how we interact with elders. But my parents never ever forced us to do anything we didn't want to as far as activities go. But the one thing my mother insisted on is we attend swimming lessons. So that was the first introduction I had into sport. But she wanted us to pretty much feel safe swimming. And along the way, as we grew up, I maintained with the swimming, but then we started martial arts. And I found myself, I was a very awkward, fat, chubby kid. And my brother and I, we would do everything together, and he was the complete opposite, very naturally gifted, talented with everything that he did, any sport that he did. So we always had this like comradeship, but this, I want to say, competition between us. We we wanted to beat each other, but we would never let anybody beat us. So I'm sure you
Yeah.
relate to that with your own brother. And growing up, man, we did everything from martial arts to cricket to soccer to basketball to volleyball. I mean, there wasn't anything that we wouldn't be willing to try and give a go. For me, initially, I felt very awkward in the process. I wasn't that physical, but I was determined because my main social circle was my friends from martial arts. So even though I had a lot of friends from school, we would train every night in the evening. So we just gravitated towards that crew and all different backgrounds, but we had the same thing in common. And then I think the martial arts then stemmed into other areas of our lives. But back then, it was a very traditional way of thinking. Study, work hard, get a great job. You never really look at going out on your own and doing certain things. So that was my main focus. Just studied, was a really good student, learned how to amalgamate my sports and my academics, as well as my friends. And then it wasn't until I think it was 2000 and no, it was 1997 that I immigrated to Australia. Same reason, South Africa was just getting a little bit unsafe, and my family had an opportunity to immigrate. And my brother and I at the time weren't very keen on doing that because we had already, I think I was 20 at the time, so I was kind of established in my own environment. So that was a very interesting challenge to leave South Africa to come to Australia, and we've never really been here before. At that time, I had already been an international swimmer or an international martial arts competitor. I had just completed my first year of psychology and law back home. So when we got to Australia, I didn't get any credits for law. I got 6 months worth of psychology, but there was a martial arts school here. And to be honest, I think that's what saved me. Having the same like-minded people, doesn't matter what country you're on, when they've got that martial arts background, you tend to connect a lot easier because you've got something in common. And your perception and your etiquette in life seems to amalgamate easier. And that's what I found at that age anyway. And when I got here, I was here, did my postgrad here, studied here, along the way stayed with sports, but unfortunately my family broke down just before we even moved here. So it wasn't even a matter of like 6 months and we had all just gone our separate ways. Me being stubborn, I realized that I didn't want, I sacrificed so much to be here. So I was like, I'm not going to go anywhere until I complete my studies and qualify for Australia's citizenship. And in the meantime, I had a lot of personal issues with my father, purely because he was the reason the family broke down. When I say the reason, he was the determining factor, but he wasn't the catalyst. You know, there was a lot of things that led him to the point that he was at, and I realized that later on in life. And he did the best he could in the situation he was in. And since then, like, we went through our difficulties, but we've become really, really close now. But I was left pretty much here in Australia. My brother had gone back overseas. My father went to Portugal. My mother stayed, but she had started a relationship with a guy. So I found myself just gravitating more towards my martial arts family. And mate, that just led one thing to the other. I continued to train. I did well, did my university degree, and I was going to go back home for South Africa just for a little while to see my brother and also just to do some postgrad work. Before I went back, I started to get severe headaches, dizzy spells, and I found that my tongue would cramp up when I spoke. And went to the doctors before going back home, and they told me it was just stress. They said, don't worry about the stress, you know, with all your uni and all your work and everything else. Just take these muscle relaxants, try to get some rest, and you'll be fine. When I got to South Africa, the symptoms progressively got worse. Did a brain scan. I remember something was up when I was in the scan for over 2 hours. I didn't realize that at the time. And I would say the Lord's Prayer, or I'd recite books or poems in my head. There was little games I would do just to, because I tend to be a bit claustrophobic. But it got to a point I realized, hold on, it felt, honestly, it felt like 45 minutes. But by the time I came out of it, the radiologist had told me, look, no, you're in there for close to 2.5 hours. We did find something. And usually they don't give this information straight away. But I had known him personally, and the radiology department back home had already closed at that time. And that's when they told me that I had a brain tumor. But the good thing was it seemed benign. But the negative thing was that it was an inoperable tumor. It was in the skull base. So if you have to draw a line directly behind from my left eye and from my left ear, where they crossed, that's where the tumor was pretty much. And it was the size of a toilet paper roll, the inside of a toilet paper roll.
Shit.
Yeah, so at the time, and I mean, I was very down the line, you know, like no drinking, no smoking, staying healthy. And I remember getting stung a little bit because I felt I was cheated, you know, like I've done everything right. I've done everything that's expected of me. Like, what the fuck now? And then I realized, worrying about it, thinking about it, it was just too difficult. So what we did is we said, let's focus on the solutions. Again, things happen for a reason. So as much as my family broke down, the positive of that is my dad living in Europe, he had a few contacts. So we were able to access some really high-level surgeons. We did speak to surgeons in South Africa as well as Australia. The Australian doctor at the time had not operated this type of tumor. Usually it's a too high risk. The guy in South Africa had done 6, and he pretty much told me to get my stuff in order, that he gave me about 2 years. And we found a Professor Fish and Professor Sammy. Professor Fish had retired. Professor Sammy was still practicing. He had this clinic in Germany, Hanover, called International Neuroscience Institute, INI. And basically, the hospital itself is next level, man. You should Google it.
Yeah.
It's designed, and the architecture is like a brain. And the actual layout inside shows the different levels, as well as the spinal cord, which is the lift down the middle. So from an architectural point of view, it's phenomenal, very modern, very sophisticated. But all they do there is purely deal with neurological conditions, mostly brain. And I had to go to Portugal, do some more tests because we were trying to get subsidy to do the surgery. Long story short, after that journey, I had been in Portugal now for a few months, got accepted for the surgery, went saw Professor Sammy. Then came the difficult decision in deciding what are we going to do. Are we going to radiate? Are we going to do a partial retraction? And at the time, I was fit, I was healthy, I was strong. I think I was 24. The doctors had told me I pretty much had my tumor for about 3 or 4 years before I presented the symptoms. And my tumor is a glomus jugular tumor, and they say more likely it happens in women over 60. And the odds of you getting it, you have a better chance of winning the lotto. So I just thought, well, like if that's the case, I've never really played the lotto because I always thought I'm going to need my luck elsewhere. A little bit of superstition in me. But I decided to do the surgery because I figured I didn't want to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. I was fit, I was healthy. If I had to delay it any further, I mean, even if I managed to get another 10 years, I would be in a worse predicament then. So my dad and I had some serious conversations, and I chose to, and I needed to get my mindset right. So I remember going back and saying to my dad, give me a couple of weeks and we'll get it done. And within 5 or 6 days, I was just like, Dad, I'm ready, let's do it. And we got on a plane, flew over to Germany. We had the top French radiologist come fly in, and he did an embolization on the tumor. So usually with these type of tumors, when you operate, you need a blood transfusion because there's so much blood loss. And he came over with embolization to go through your artery and your groin, all the way up, and they put these little coils that the arteries that feed the tumor with blood, they just stop that. So basically the tumor actually shrinks in size because it's no longer full of blood, and it's easier to operate, less bleeding. And he did a phenomenal job. Like just from that first one, it was almost like the tumor had disappeared. It was interesting at the time because it was so rare. I was constantly getting looked at, doing videos, doing different neurological tests, because they wanted to document as much as they possibly could, especially with someone being as young as me with this condition. Fast forward to the surgery, it was a 13-hour surgery. And yeah, man, I didn't even realize how long it had been, obviously.
Wow.
The doctor that operated me, Professor Sammy, at the time, I would say like late 50s, early 60s. I would dare ask him his age, but I have to mention, like in the years and the doctors and people that I've dealt with, I've never met anyone quite like the team in Germany. And when I say the team in Germany, it's not Germans. It's multicultural. There were Brazilian doctors, French doctors, German doctors, American doctors, and these were the top in their field working in Germany as residents to Professor Sammy. And wow. I found that extremely humbling because the way they interacted with me and their demeanor with me was compassionate, caring, considerate. Here in Australia, I've gone and got my results, but unfortunately, sometimes the doctors are only looking at the results while I'm in the office. That can be very anxious and stressful, especially because I'm very attuned to people's reactions, facial reactions, and energy. So when I'm there, they can't hide what they're seeing. So for me, it creates a very anxious moment. And I don't want to misread it, but in Germany, no, you get in there, they've already prepped for your appointment. They know exactly what information they need to deliver. They're exceptional communicators, the whole team. But never forget, Tatajiba, one of the doctors, said to me, Pedro, we may not know the solution. That does not mean there isn't a solution. All we need to do is find it, and we will find you one. And they did, mate. Professor Sammy and I spoke. I also have to mention, the day that I had the surgery with the French radiologist, Professor Sammy was there at that surgery to support me. So we're talking about the number one surgeon in the world. And when I got wheeled in there, he came up to me, put his arm on me. I was lying on the bed, and just knowing that he was there overseeing everything filled me with confidence. And I mean, there was no reason for him to doubt the French surgeon at all, the best in the world as far as radiologists go. And he was there to support. And so he did the 13-hour surgery on me, and straight after me, he went ahead and operated on a girl that had been flown in from Greece with a brain aneurysm. She was only about 9 years old, and then he did her surgery straight after mine. So this man is just absolutely exceptional. I mean, there's a really good example of someone who's living their true purpose, towards mankind. But after the
Yeah.
13-hour surgery, as a consequence to remove the tumor, because I did say to Professor Sammy, I was like, I don't want to play games with this. I want this thing absolutely gone. And he said, no, mate, we'll get it all. The tumor itself doesn't sit on its own. It actually infiltrates other nerves and tissues and bone matter. So in order to remove the tumor, they had to remove those things too. So I lost like my hypoglossal nerve, my accessory nerve, my occipital lobe is ceramic. So they removed a few things, and as a consequence, I do have left shoulder atrophy. My left shoulder rolls a little bit. You can clearly hear my voice. It's pretty hoarse. So basically, the epiglottis doesn't work on the left-hand side. The left vocal cord doesn't engage. It used to stay open. And I lost my ability to swallow, which means I couldn't have anything orally because I would aspirate it. They said that it should come back, but while I was there, the more I tried, I just kept choking. They finally decided to put a PEG tube in my stomach, which is something that I feed from. And all the while, I just kept trying to force myself to swallow. And then later, with more testing, we discovered that peristalsis, which is the movement of food down the esophagus to the stomach, the right side was working, the left side wasn't, which means it's kind of like milking a cow, I guess. So if only one side's doing it, it's kind of just bouncing on itself in the same area. So I'm able to swallow past my trachea, but I can't get it down. So it kind of collects, and then I'll choke on it. I still try to this day, but I feed 100% through a tube. The recovery process was really hard because I'd spent so many times so many days and months in hospital. Finally, when I came out, we still were confined to Germany for a while to make sure it was safe to fly. But I made the most of it, mate. I studied languages, studied the places, studied locations, studied health. I put more energy into remedial therapies, and I knew everything about my condition, front and back. And my dad would often say, "Why are you stressing yourself out over that?" I'm like, "It's my life, it's my body, it's my choices. And for me to make the best choices, I need to know what's happening with me." So I was very lucky that I had that sort of determination. I had a great group of friends about me. Everybody treated me normal. And obviously, you've got people that just care about you, and they, with good intention, they may hold you back out of fear of hurting you. But majority of people were anything I would challenge myself with, they were very supportive with. But as I got back and did more tests and scans, they found out that I actually had other tumors developing in that time period as well. So I have another brain tumor that's more frontal to the original, and another one that's more posterior. They even wondered if it was the same tumor, but after running tests, they realized it was different. I've done a genetic test. There's no malformations in my genes. And I do have an active level 2 no tumor in my neck as well, which we monitor every year. So the interesting part for me was that I never wanted to be looking over my shoulder, and I ended up looking over my shoulder. And I did all this work, and I'm still in the same boat. So I adopted the attitude is like, why is this happening to me? I started to think, well, why is this happening for me? And along the way, and it's interesting, it's been over 20 plus years now, but I've had my ups and downs, good moments, bad moments. But my experience at the time, especially feeding through a PEG tube, it's becoming more popular now, and especially with the younger kids and stuff that have cognitive dysfunctions or even physical disorders. They need to be nourished through a PEG tube. But back then, I was one of the only people that had one, and I was definitely one of the only mobile people that would have one. So most people wouldn't even be training with this type of tube. It was more mature age. So it did teach me how to manage life with it. And the one thing I remember is the doctors wanted me to walk around with a pump. And basically, it would pump like 1 ml of food every 30 seconds. So 500 mils would take me an hour and a half.
Wow.
And I was like, no, not going to happen. My life's going to be normal. And the way I thought was like, I'm not going to be my condition's bitch. My condition is going to be my bitch. I'm going to make it work for me, not the other way around. A lot of times I find that we kind of do what we need to do to get better rather than say, no, we're going to get better because these things we need to do. And that change in shift in perception really helped me. I was like, well, I've got to eat through a tube. My meals have to be. I was buying this artificial crap, which is, look, it's not crap, but there's a purpose for it, but it's synthetic. It's these spaceman food, I call it. Frisine, Carby, Nutrison, Energy, like they're different products. They're like protein shakes, but they have all your nutritional requirements in the minerals, vitamins, carbs, proteins, fats. As an example, I was having 4,500 calories a day, and I was sitting around 65, 67 kilos.
And what do you weigh at the moment, Peds?
Now I'm sitting about 82, 83, but that's because I'm also competing. On average, I'll sit around 85 to 90. But this is something I've had to work continuously over the years to put on the weight. And I wanted to put on healthy weight, not just put on weight. So, you need the patience for it. It's very easy to put on 10 kilos, easy, but you want to put on the right 10 kilos. And it was more like when I lost weight, because if I got sick, keeping the nutritional levels up was difficult. So, yeah, man, it wasn't until 4 or 5 years later that I competed. I was sponsored by International Protein at the time. This company was amazing. They sponsored me from the get-go, and it was the first time that I switched to something else other than the food the doctors gave me. And I competed, did quite well, won, and realized, this is the perfect sport for it. I wasn't able to fight anymore. There was a few insurance purposes and concerns, obviously. So I still trained.
This was for bodybuilding?
The original was International Protein, was for bodybuilding, but the reason why I switched to that was I was still training martial arts, but I wasn't able to compete at the level I used to. And for me, competition isn't about arrogance, it's about testing my skill. And I'm quite comfortable being in the dojo and sparring. It's very different when you're in an environment where everyone's watching. Your adrenaline's up, but the guy you're fighting, his adrenaline's up, and you don't know each other. And I was always afraid of that. I find those were environments that used to scare me. And I liked putting myself in those environments and controlling my brain. So one of the tricks I used to use I would just stare at my opponent, and they would get smaller and smaller and smaller, and I would just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And by the time we walked onto the mat, that mat was mine. So I used to feel that energy, and I loved that feeling, and I have applied that to my tumor. So many times my tumor would be so overwhelming, I felt so insignificant and powerless. But the bigger I expanded my energy, the smaller my tumor got within me. So there was more of me and less of my condition, respectively, from a spiritual sense, I guess. And that always made me feel more powerful and in control, regardless of the fact that I had to cater within my limitations of having this condition. And when I switched to bodybuilding, my friend slash trainer, coach, Ricky Levers, he's the one who first convinced me to get on stage. And the main reason I got onto stage wasn't to look at how amazing my body looks. It was for me to feel comfortable, challenging myself to be in front of an audience with this tube coming out of my stomach. That was terrifying for me, and I thought, it's a different type of challenge, and it was going to be a once-off thing, and it ended up being addicted to it, saying not so much the competition side, but the lifestyle. What I realized that competing kind of created the right environment for my body to make the positive gains it needed to. When you go through a prep and a conditioning phase and you push your body to that point, then you go into a growth phase that's natural. Your body actually wants to pull all the food and nutrients in. So I found that I was constantly getting these great results by doing these rides of competing and then recovering, competing and recovering. And the ride would just get higher and higher and higher. But the best lesson was how I controlled my emotions during prep. So for me, it was of course about the competition itself, but it was the lessons that I was learning by prepping. So the lessons came from the journey. You know, we get so tired that you don't want to do your cardio and walk. So how do you convince yourself to do your cardio and walk? You get so tired and grumpy and you've on low carbohydrates, so you get edgy and you snap at your kids. What I realized was that this was my choice and nobody else needs to suffer because of me. And just like my condition, my biggest fear was always putting other people out, being a burden to people. And I decided I wasn't going to do that. I took full control of my condition. And I would still go out for dinners. I would never want anybody to feel bad that they were eating and I wasn't. So that came in handy with prep. And it wasn't until Ricky contacted John Davies, the owner of World Gym Australia, and one of the owners, but the founder. I mean, this man's a legend and he's got the biggest heart. And he sat down with me and he actually suggested, why don't you blend some fish and rice and inject that? And I did. Obviously not eating real food for a few years, my body had an aversion, which again added to another learning curve about how our body retains salt. When we're not having enough sodium, our aldosterone goes up. Then when we do have sodium, we bloat. So I went through that whole experience all the while learning. And but then I decided, no, this is so much better for me, and I started blending real foods. This was back in like 2009. So fast forward to now, there's mothers out there with kids with tubes. Sarah, it's one of the books that we wrote, Blended. She creates wholesome meal blends, which is blended food that is specifically made for kids, that's healthy and clean and natural. Melanie, she runs a book called Blended and a podcast called Tubi Talks. These are all mums that have started to amalgamate all this knowledge and this experience, and they're bringing it all together. But my purpose has been to help everybody else with the tube. You know, because I've lived with one. I'm very blessed that I still have a lot of my function, but at the same time, I'm now the example of what they can achieve with their condition. And
So when was the last time you were able to taste pets?
oh, mate, so I still taste. So I still taste. Yeah, definitely. So if I'm injecting a meal, I'll actually chew something and spit it into a bucket. Now I know it doesn't sound great. But the one reason I also do it is if I inject and I don't chew, the food just kind of sits there. But if I'm chewing it, that stimulates your digestive system, right? So as soon as I start doing that, I'm chewing, my body's registering the food, and I'm able to digest my food a lot better, and it absorbs better. Plus, I feel more satisfied. And not being able to swallow, I did become a lot more experimental with food, and I love to cook because it kind of curbed that desire to eat. And I often say that I don't really miss the eating as much as I miss the drinking. Like in hot days at the gym, the fresh orange juice going down your throat and stuff, that I definitely miss, slushies. I miss that more than the food. But but with the food, I get to chew, I get to spit, and I don't put on weight. And I actually have it lucky in the sense that everyone will look at this and see the negatives, and there are negatives. And for me, the biggest is probably the prep side of things, because you have to be prepared for everything. Like whether you go to a movie, you've got plans. Even my family, sometimes they've got their whole day planned, but they can forget, like if we're going to be away for too long, old man's got to eat. So the interesting thing is I used to really get mad about that. I used to get upset when I wasn't considered, when people wouldn't help me with my meals. And having said that, everybody has always been willing to help, and there's been times when people have helped. But because I was taking care of everybody else as well, I started to feel sorry for myself. I'm like, but no one's really taking care of me. I'm doing all the work. And the reality is, yes, bitch, you are, because you wanted to. Like I'm the one who said, I don't want to be a burden on people. And I've done that great a job that everybody trusts that I'm taking care of myself. And if I have to ask anybody for anything, no one ever says no. They're always willing to help. So that was a very interesting, I just wanted to share that because talking about this reminded me of my emotions when it came to eating. And now I don't feel bad if I need help, because I know I do most of the stuff, and everybody now is a lot more aware as well. So it just amalgamated quite naturally with the prep and for training with bodybuilding.
It's really interesting, Peds. You're able to look at life differently, and I think can't remember if it's true or the stats say that I think 90% of everything that we think about is negative. But you've had such a long, arduous road, and you're able to still think positively and put that into your your journey and help others. Like it's truly remarkable, mate.
Mate,
How does
yeah, practice. Honestly,
yeah
practice. I actually just did a podcast the other day, and I was talking about they've looked at the difference between positive talking and negative talking, and they've realized that less negative speech is more beneficial, and you get better results than improving your positive talk. So, but we do focus a lot on the positive talk. And I did a lot of exercises in the mirror because I had facial paralysis. So trying to get that to work, the physio would often do that. And then came with the positive affirmations in the mirror. And one of the lessons I learned was like, it was hard for me because there's this underlying thing where your body just straight goes to, we don't believe the truth. We believe the negative. We believe what makes sense to us. We actually choose to do that. It's a choice. And your life may suck, but it's never going to be as bad as your negative response to it. So, yeah, life can get difficult, but if I'm negative about it, I'm making it more difficult for myself. Yeah. So I had to make that conscious decision. Okay, I chose to fight. I want to fight. I want to be alive. So does that mean just fighting to stay alive from a physical perspective, or fighting to live a healthy mental life as well? So taking ownership of like, mate, I'm not always positive. And it took a lot of practice for me to get to a point that realizing and being aware of my negativity. And the biggest mistake people make, in my opinion, is they allow themselves to spiral. It starts slowly. Oh, I've had a bad day at work. Nothing seems to go right. I spent so much time on that project. And they start to amplify. Now my deadline's going to be delayed. And it's going to be, last month was delayed. Now my boss is going to get on my case. I don't need to. And then we just spiral into more and more negativity.
It's like compounding interest.
Exactly, mate. And before you know it, it's so hard to get out of that because you're so deflated by the end of it. And the only person who did that to you was you. Yeah. It doesn't matter what your past patterns are or what you've been taught and how you've been conditioned. At that moment in time, right now, for whatever reasons, you did that to yourself. And I started, I've been really bad where suicide was an option. And what I realized is also, I don't know, I want to try everything before I make a decision. And for me, when it came to when I was that bad with suicide, it became more about, well, we're going to die anyways. Even if I don't try to end it, it's going to end for me sooner or later. So I found some sort of like, the decision's made. The only decision that I have control over is how I choose to connect to whatever time I have here.
Yes.
We all owe a death. We can't escape that. It's a debt we all owe.
It's interesting. Sorry, you go.
Oh, no, but I was going to say, but what it matters is how we live. And it's not the things we do, but how we feel about what we do.
Yeah. I heard Gary Vee say this. The odds of you being born is 400 trillion to 1. And you think about this, I mean, our parents could have had sex 2 minutes before or 2 minutes after, or they might not have even met, and we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Exactly.
And it's interesting. I mean, you have a a better chance of winning the lottery than you do to
Are you,
actually have a life. And what would be one of the best piece of advice that you could give to someone that's struggling, that's going through some sort of hardship, whether it be a family breakdown, some sort of financial stress? What would be something that you would encourage that person to do?
um, oh, it's just frozen on a sec, bro. Oh, there.
You're
So
good?
what was that last bit?
Yeah, so what would be the one piece of advice that you would give to someone that's going through some hardship, going through some adversity, whether it be a breakdown in a family or a relationship situation? What would be the steps that that person should do to get themselves out of that?
Well, once you're in it, that's the tough part, is getting out of it. And so many times I wanted a cheat sheet to get out of those emotions, because sometimes we will recognize how we're feeling. So when we do, whether you have a post-it note or something that reminds you, or a elastic band on your wrist, those are the moments I tell people, stop. No matter what, at this moment, nothing's going to change. So it doesn't matter how bad you are now, it is as it is right now. Nothing's going to change. So first question is, do you want to feel this way? Second question, how do you want to feel? And then, and what you do is, straight away, when you stop and you become aware of what you're feeling, not the reasons, become aware of that emotion. Do you want to feel that way? Nobody wants to feel that way. How do you want to feel? Then we can look at, I want to feel happy, I want to feel at peace, I want to feel more positive, I want to feel hopeful, whatever it is. I found with experience that the moment we say the positive, we feel better, slightly, and then straight away our brain goes back to, I want to feel hopeful, but life sucks. But this is happening. And our brain wants to fight us. So you just say, I want to feel better. Stop. What does better feel like? What does hope feel like? So if I had to ask you now, what does happy feel like? What does joy feel like? What does love feel like? Can you sense how after those questions there were part of you that connected to that feeling, but yet nothing's happening to create that feeling? It's all in you. So when we decide, I want to feel more loved, great. The first thing to recognize is, it is only you. So anything that you want from somebody else, your family's breaking down, you want them to be calm, I will have to be calm. I want my partner to show me that they love me. I want to show me that I love me. Whatever we want from somebody else, we have to stop, connect to the emotion we want, and then remind ourselves that we want to give it to ourselves before we ask anybody else for it. And I believe in the purpose that we have from a humanity perspective. Every problem is, if we can give ourselves love, we can genuinely give love. But if I'm giving you love and I don't know how to love myself, I'm only giving you my perspective of what the love I'm giving you feels like. I don't know what it feels like because I haven't. It's like cooking dinner and only you eat my food. I want to cook dinner.
Yeah, that term that gets floating around, self-love. What do you think self-love means to you? What does that mean?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I struggle with that term a little bit, and I think that's probably just the trigger in me. But I struggle with self-love because I think people equate the meaning of love very differently. And I often say, people that say, oh, I love myself, they try to convince themselves. For me, self-love is self-acceptance. And when you truly accept who you are, good and bad, you're okay with it. Why are you okay with it? Because you know the aspects of yourself that you don't like, and you've already put plans of action in place to rectify those for yourself. And there's parts about yourself that you love and you're proud of, And you've also put practice and plans of action to do more of those things. So it's not necessarily about self-love, but self-acceptance for me. And what happens is in society, oh, I love my boyfriend, I love my girlfriend, I love my parents, but how we treat the people we love, like Eric Tolle says, you cannot, there's no opposite to love. So it doesn't matter how angry I am at you or what you've done to me. If I truly love you and I'm connected to that, how I treat you is always going to be in a good way. I can hold my boundaries, be direct, but it's always going to have love and compassion. So I don't think that we're at the ability, most people struggle to do that for themselves, to give themselves that love and that compassion. So I think self-love is something we strive to, but I don't think we get there until we have self-acceptance.
Yes, yeah, well said, Peds. It's interesting. We really are. Sometimes we are our worst critic,
Oh,
and
definitely.
we would always talk down on ourselves. The way that some people talk to themselves, I mean, they would never talk to a friend or a close family member
No.
the way that they talk to themselves. And it's interesting because we obviously strive to be better, not just the way we talk to people, but how we initially are with ourselves. And it can be extremely deleterious to talk negatively and down upon
I,
yourself. And
Absolutely.
and I really think that, to be honest, I think the school curriculum needs to be changed. I think
Oh, mate.
there needs to be more emphasis on teaching children on how to regulate their emotions, meditation, mindfulness.
I
What do
couldn't
you
agree more.
what do you think that schools could implement to really
Mate,
encourage and
yeah.
teach children?
Mate, honestly, I wouldn't even know where to begin with that because the problem that you have with schools, and I'm speaking generally, is the teachers. Because the teachers themselves aren't able to teach what they should be doing. So when you want to look and you want to see a curriculum, a teacher who teaches geography knows geography. But none of those teachers will be in a position to teach about life and perspectives and self-regulation and self-acceptance because they are challenged by that all the time as well. And I believe schools teach you what to think, not how to think. So I think what it starts off like Jose Silva's mind control methods, that everything that we do and we connect to comes from our alpha brainwave. It's the calmest brainwave that we have. And that's when also we connect to our spirituality, our higher power, if you might say, or our creativity for some people. Like, to me, it's all the same, whatever name you give it. And if kids were taught how to regulate their emotions as opposed to catering to their emotions, I think it will make a more of a challenge for them to then also learn more about themselves.
Yeah.
If you cater to my emotion rather than challenge me to regulate my emotion, there's nothing for me to do. I have an emotion, you cater it, my job's done. But I don't understand why I have that emotion, why it keeps coming up. And the worst part is I've given you all the power because you may regulate it, you may accept it, you may not. But at the end of the day, I'm still the one feeling it. So by doing that at schools, I think kids would then start to develop this sense of self-identity. And I don't even want to go into this gender stuff that's going on because to me, that's just, once again, catering. It's perfectly fine for you to feel the way you feel. It's perfectly fine for you to accept who you are and how you feel that. But it doesn't mean that other people have to lose themselves in order to cater to what you think of yourself. And I think that's where we are losing ourselves as a society. We can accept
Yeah.
ourselves for who we are and accept each other for our own personal journeys. If I need you to use a certain pronoun, does that mean that I'm okay with who I am? Or does that mean I want you to be okay with who I am?
Yes.
We're
It's
so much
very
more concerned. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you just said. And for anyone that's listening, I mean, the stats don't lie. You'll start to see depression and anxiety in children as young as, I think, 9 or 8, And it's interesting. I think there's a situation I think that's happening in society right now, and I think it's quite scary because it might have to do with social media and just the way that this generation is being brought up. Because you and I were, we were sort of brought up. I think you were born in the 80s or early in the 80s,
Late
Pedro?
70s, mid 70s, late
70s?
70s.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
I was born in
76,
the
bro.
yeah, so I was born in the 80s. We didn't have social media growing up in the
No.
90s. I think Facebook and Instagram, I think, came out in 2011. I think Instagram and Facebook
Yeah,
was
man.
around
Yeah.
2008. And
Yeah.
it's quite interesting. You're starting to see more of this anxiety and depression in younger kids and adolescents. And sadly, this is resulting in suicide and things like that. What do you think of this current wave of social media and what it's doing to this younger generation?
Well, mate, I have, I think it's going to do to, it's almost like, let me use a hammer as a thing. A hammer can be a tool, or it can be a weapon. You can use a hammer to nail the nail down, pull nails out, whatever you can create with it. Or you can bang the table and break it up. Social media is the same thing. If I'm using it to create more negativity in my life, I'm going to harness that. So I do think that the rise of social media and the internet and all that definitely made life a lot better in many aspects. It's how we choose to use that tool. And there's a lot of positive information, there's a lot of social information, there's a lot of health information, people sharing their inspirational journeys. Like, we wouldn't be able to do this back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So, I mean, we're now using it as a positive tool. Unfortunately, though, we are all human beings, and we are animals by instinct, so we relate more to the adrenaline rush of negativity than we do to the happiness of peace and tranquility and calm. We all strive for that, but as creatures, we're attracted to the negative. So with social media and talking about how things are getting harnessed, I think it goes back to what we were talking about before, as far as accepting that each of us are here for our own personal journeys. And I'm not saying that in a selfish way. My personal journey, the outcome of that is to benefit humanity. So the more focused we are in our personal purpose, the better we will be for humanity, because we find our strengths. And I think the biggest thing that social media now is doing, though, and I think this is where things can go wrong, is that it's trying to stimulate you to look for that validation from strangers rather than from yourself. So what you're doing is you're mimicking everybody else on social media in order to get as much attention, or you're changing your look, or you're offering likes in order to get likes. And that becomes a negotiating place, and it becomes bartering, and we're spending so much energy rather than finding out what can we do to make ourselves happy. And if we use social media for our personal benefit, but not giving the power to the likes or follows that we get, we can get more awareness about ourselves in that process than we would if we got 1,000 likes.
Yeah, I think you made two points there, Peds. Social media can be used for good, 100%. It can be a platform to promote inspiration and positivity, and you can reach a much broader audience. But unfortunately, social media does have a dark side as well. It's interesting because Sean Reed, who I had on my podcast not so long ago, is a dating and relationships coach.
Yep.
And what's happening right now, especially, I think most people don't really know what's going on, but we're actually in a mating crisis.
Yep.
And social media could be a little bit of a result of that, because what's happening is now you're getting people online that are able to reach, very, I guess, very influential people. It's interesting. Someone that I guess has just been brought up out of school, an 18-year-old female, she hasn't really had a lot of life experience, and might have a large social media following and is getting the same draw as an A-list male celebrity. So what's happening is, especially when we look at dating apps as well, you're getting a majority of women only chasing a very small attraction in a very small portion of men. And what's happening is it's leaving the rest of the men invisible. And then the women that actually are chasing the very small amount of men, the women get used and discarded by these men. They end up resenting those men and say, oh no, all men are to blame whatsoever. And then the men at the bottom that haven't been seen or who are invisible are saying, well, what about me? I haven't had a chance. I haven't even been seen by you. So it's interesting because I think what's happened with social media is it's only managed to be successful for the very high status men at the top because they have a plethora of options. And unfortunately, the men that haven't been even seen by any women whatsoever don't get any dates. They don't get anything from any women, find it extremely difficult. So what do you think of what's happening right now, especially with social media and what it's doing to relationships and dating? Because the stats don't lie. Look at the divorce stats. I think 70 to 80% of the divorces are initiated by women.
Yep.
And men are fed up. I mean, there's this term called passport bros, where men are seeking wives to go overseas to find more traditional women. But you don't see men from other countries coming to Western countries to find women. So Morgan Stanley brought out a stat, and it's predicted, I think, that 25 to 44, or ages between, or no, 45% of ages between women between the ages of 25 and 44 will be childless and single. So what do you think of what's happening with marriage rates, dating in general, and what it's doing?
Mate, for me, but I don't think it's the last 5 years that's been happening. I think social media and the internet has obviously sped the process up, but it's not the cause of it. I think in the book No More Mr. Nice Guy, he explains as well that what happened is families started to break down, and fathers, instead of working at home or working on the fields, would then go to urban areas to work, so they would move away, or the father was always out the house and come back, and the parents started to break up. They made it easier for a woman to be without a husband. And when I look back at my grandparents, my grandfather and my grandmother, they stayed together till their dying days. But they loved each other. Very different way of my perception of love. And the reality is, it became about, they fought like cat and dog as well. But they always respected one another. And the mentality they had back in the day was that, I mean, my grandfather worked hard, and he built everything up from scratch and lost it more than once. And he immigrated, he was not even 19 years old, with a suitcase from Portugal. And he built his fortune from the ground up. But he met my grandmother, and she was his purpose, to build his fortune for his family. She had a purpose to provide a home for her family. The two of them had distinctive roles. And if they had to get divorced, never mind the social or religious aspects back in the day that would cause from a divorce, because that was social pressure as well, which I don't think is healthy. But they both had this commitment, which was like, man, this guy is crazy. My wife is crazy. But how am I going to adapt what I'm doing to make my life with this crazy person bearable? So straight away, the focus was like, there are no other options. This is the commitment I made. Now I need to fulfill my commitment, even if I'm not really happy right now. And over time, it got from catering children, and sometimes catering involves disciplining, to allowing a sense of freedom. There's always an option. And sometimes when it comes with that, we lose the commitment to follow through. Because if we fail, there's something else. But if we think there's nothing else after this, then we'll give everything a go. Social media has amplified that by, number one, making women feel like there's always options. And I hear it quite often. Along the way, women have set a different standards of expectation from their partners compared to what men have from their partners.
Yeah.
With the men that I work with, a lot of them wouldn't dare to say a woman has to cook for me or do my laundry. But all the women I work with expect their boyfriends to open the doors for them, chase the robber away, take the trash out, carry the bags, whatever the case is. And I've even had this discussion with my daughter, and I've said to her, I said, you're the lady of the house, you should be dishing up. And she goes, well, you can dish up yourself. I said, of course I can. And you can open your own doors. I was like, but I'm not doing it because it's a man's job and you're not doing it because it's a woman's job. We're doing it because we are caring for one another. I would open a door up for a man as much as I would for a woman, because I want to have that character of being a provider, considerate, and I put effort into it. And just because a woman wants to cook for a man and make sure he's fed and he has the energy to go to work, but when a woman cooks for a man, it's especially the woman he loves. For most men, they feel privileged. They feel special. If a woman's doing it just because she has to, and it's her so-called traditional role, the man's not going to feel that. So it doesn't work if you force it, and it doesn't work if you denounce it. If you care about your partner, you'll put the effort in to make sure they're happy. And I think social media has made it more about us. What are you going to do? Here's your top 5 tricks. Here are your 5 options if he's not doing this. This is what you do. And all of a sudden, we're taking the focus away from what we can change in ourselves, back onto looking for the right person or wanting the right person to change for us. And when I look at men going overseas to find women, my question is, what is it that you need from a woman that you're not giving yourself? And the same question goes to women that have all these expectations from men. It's like, if you're independent and powerful, then why do you need a man? And then once we find that we can give ourselves what we need, then we're ready to be that person, that partner. And I think social media, and honestly, I'm not going to even blame social media. I'm going to blame the people that watch social media. As a society, we're fucking lazy. We want the quick fix. We want the easy way out, and we don't want to do the work. 100%. So if it's easier for me to dump my girlfriend and find a new girl, oh yeah, I might have to flirt, I might have to spend more money or do all whatever is expected of me. But that's a lot easier than me actually having to learn how to communicate better with my partner that I have now. And all that's doing is instilling this idea in me that I can jump ship whenever I feel like it. So that starts to transfer into my job. I'm not happy at my job, I jump ship, start a new job. Not happy with we don't invest in ourselves to become better. We become better from these challenges.
Do you think that society has indoctrinated people into thinking that how gender roles should be perceived is women should be chasing a career, being the boss babe and, making 6 figures and things like that. And it's a situation that I think that a woman might find herself in where she has the 6-figure income, she has a very successful job, and then eventually when it comes time to settling down with a man and having children, unfortunately, a lot of men don't find that attractive. Like, I'm just stating a fact. Like, if I saw a degree up on the wall, I'm not going to say, oh my goodness, that's attractive, that's so hot. Because I think what men truly value and find attractive in a woman is kindness, femininity, being a supportive person, being a nurturer. These are all feminine qualities. And vice versa, what women find attractive is what I suggested. What do you think?
Well, it's a very good topic, man. And as you were talking, it was actually challenging a few of my perspectives. And you said something there: when a man sees a certificate on the wall, he doesn't find that attractive. But let me change the dynamic here. If you see a woman with a fit body, do you find that attractive?
Yes.
Yes. Do you find the body attractive, or do you find what's required to get that body attractive?
What's required to get that body?
Exactly. So what you do, of course, a nice healthy body, everyone finds attractive. We all look at that. We're all human beings. But it's not the be all and end all. It's the work ethic required to do that. And wouldn't you argue that it's the same work ethic required to get a degree?
100%.
Yeah. So when you're looking at a woman who's attractive and she's put the work in for the body she has, but she's selfish because she's only worried about her fitness. She's only dieting herself. She doesn't compromise because she's set on her goals. All of a sudden she becomes unattractive. You know, so for me, it's not about where woman decides to put her energy in. For me, it's the reasons why. Most women are going down that six-figure income or wanting to be boss babes, but how many of them truly want to be a boss babe? Meaning, some want to be a boss babe because it's social, because I'm going to get more likes, because I want to feel more powerful, because I don't want to rely on a man. Those are all external reasons. You want to be a boss babe because you feel a sense of purpose that this is what you were born to do.
Yeah.
Not because you want to. Does that make sense? And women when a woman gets to like a CEO level and she wants to then to settle down and start a family, it's going to be a lot more difficult because she's put investment into being a top-notch CEO. She can still hold on to her femininity. She can still hold on to her grace and everything else. But she's spent the last 10 to 20 years building an empire and learning skills for that. She hasn't been in an environment where she's learning the skills to be a partner. The same rule applies to men. You know, you can have a guy, I want a rich man who's a manager, I want the king. And this dude's bust his ass to make all this money and run a business, and he can lead a team. But when it comes to being a family man, he's not prepared because it's a different type of skill. It doesn't mean he can't do it. It just means his attention was elsewhere. Yeah. So those women get the guy with money, but then they're bitching and moaning that they're not getting the compassion or the consideration or any of that stuff.
One of the most alarming statistics I heard was I watched a documentary called Birth Gap, and the person that narrated it and made the documentary was a professor analyst, and he went to I think 74 different countries, and he documented his experience and interviewed some women on the documentary, and his stats came back. 80% of women, before their fertility window had closed, did not intend to not have children. So in other words, involuntary childlessness had occurred. And these women have support groups around the world that they go to grieve for the families that they never had. And I was just watching this documentary and my heart just broke for these women that, you know, they'd been in a career and grinding away and working incredibly hard, and unfortunately had missed their boat to actually settle down and have a family. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. It's biology that women only have a finite amount of time to obviously have children. Yes, there are exceptions to the rule. You do hear about women in their 40s that do have children, but it really made me upset. It really made me sad to hear that.
Mate, I you know, like again, it's those words, you know, involuntary childlessness or whatever it is that you used, or women know that there's a time frame to have kids, and what we do is we make a subconscious, or we make a decision unawares, but then we say we had no control. A woman who puts all their time and effort into a business, into a company, to being a CEO, and then finds out, oh, it's too long now, I can't have kids. I don't know. I can't begin to imagine how devastating that must be.
Yeah.
But the reality of the situation is you co-created that situation. Whether you want to accept that or not, you had a role in that, because no one held a gun to your head and said you're going to run a Fortune 500 company. You made those decisions at that time. Now you're looking back, wishing you had changed or done a different order or have regrets. And we've heard this time and time again, is that people that pass on or their deathbed, the biggest regret they have is not spending more time with their family. Not sure, and we hear this countless times, but we're a bunch of dipshits because never mind, that's not me, I can do this today. And then when we get to that point, we're going to have these regrets. So we have to get to a point where we take ownership. That's a very sad situation. But I would argue this as well. Even the parents nowadays that want to be parents and are parents, generally speaking, and I'll probably say this is like the new generation that's having kids, I'm alarmed by how inadequate a lot of these people are at being parents because they're not even fully developed with their own experiences. And now they're in control of navigating and helping a child. And all you're doing is creating a bigger problem with people that are being born that are inadequate to fulfill themselves. And by that, I don't mean that there's something wrong with you. It just means that we're lacking the tools. Let's quickly go back to martial arts. We learned how to fight first. We put practice into it. Then we were able to teach it. But how does that happen if we're not with kids? If we're not learning about ourselves, using the tools, becoming better at that, and then teaching it? We're just dealing with coping mechanisms, and then we're passing that on to our kids and always looking for an option out. With that situation, I often say to people, I think, and this is the problem with social media, that I can be a negative, is that it always only sells one perspective. And this is why the education at school needs to be different, in my opinion, is that kids need to be sat down and you have to allow them to explore what it is that they want, what it is their purpose. And with time, people will then get to a point that they have to make a difficult decision. I want to change countries. I want to have children. I want to be a CEO of a Fortune 500. That decision can impact your life later on. You may have kids, may be blessed enough and do a fantastic job, and then look back and say, oh man, I wish I never had so many kids because they cost me so much more money. I'd rather be a Fortune 500 company owner. So at the end of the day, it's our choices that we make, and taking accountability for that is probably the biggest thing. But how do we know what the right choice for us is if we're not self-aware? And that's where schools break down. That's where social media breaks down. We're kind of telling each other what's important, as opposed to asking one another what's important to you.
Yes.
And that's the problem with social media. And unfortunately, when we're talking about the mating crisis, that's the biggest issue. You know, a lot of men, and I use that term loosely because I'm going to get hammered for this, but there's boys wanting to be men. They're not real men. There's a lot of women who are girls wanting to be like women. And we're all acting and playing a role, but inside we don't feel like that role. So we're going to attract boys who act like men, and we're going to attract girls who act like women. And then we're going to be miserable, and then we're going to blame them as opposed to ourselves.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Do you think also that there's a cultural shift, a narrative that's pushing towards young boys? Because you think about this, right? We grew up with Arnold Schwarzenegger. We grew up with Jean-Claude Van Damme. We grew up with Bruce Lee. Now, I guess television and entertainment, you know, you're getting people like Machine Gun Kelly wearing a dress, Harry Styles wearing a dress. And it's pushing an interesting narrative on how men are supposed to be. And then with the rise of Andrew Tate, you know, and what he's talking about in masculinity and how life is hard as a man. You have to struggle to work to build you up into the man you're supposed to become. What do you think needs to be done to raise our young boys in society now more than ever?
Yeah, more time with their fathers.
Yeah.
You know, like at the end of the day, there are studies, and not many people might want to hear this, but it's been shown that single parent fathers actually have a better result than single parent female mothers.
I have heard that.
So look, and it just is the way it is. And it's not because one's better than the other, it's because men and women are built differently. I would argue that women, in all honesty, are the essence of life. Mother Earth, energy. I mean, whether we like it or not, women are by far way more powerful than men. And the reason I say that is because women can elicit a response from a man that another man can't give another man. A woman can bring out the beast in the man. And by beast, I don't mean aggressive. I mean that powerful alpha that's calm, collected, composed, and confident. A woman can bring that out in him. Men can get there, but when a man loves a woman, that's his power. And a man's strength comes in living his purpose to protect, to navigate. We lack a certain degree of empathy when it comes to our kids, because we know that whatever pain we cause them, the world's going to be harder. So we don't feel as sorry for them as their mothers might, because we understand that there's a purpose to this. But mothers play a vital role in balancing that out. So one without the other, we'd all lost. Women can create that compassion, that holistic, that purpose for living, that reason for us wanting to be home. And men create that thing, that power to protect our homes, to look after one another. Nothing that we see is built by men. And yeah, even though we can appreciate it together, a man's purpose has always been to attract the right woman. So when you see men behaving not like men, I think that comes more of a social narrative to squash men. I think it comes from this fear of giving men too much power. And the reality is, it's the same problem if we give women too much power.
Yeah.
You know?
What do you think of the phrase, Peds? Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. What do you think that means to you?
Mate, I believe that's spot on. You look at it generationally, right? We work our butts off, we have nothing to give to our kids. Our kids grow up with more than what we had, they become more complacent. But then they're living off our success and they generate a little bit extra to them. So my grandchildren would be even worse. And then once that happens, they're going to lose everything that was created, and then the cycle starts again. But that's because we're not aware. If I've created my fortune or I've created my life, for whatever that means to me, when I say fortune, I mean I don't care if I have $1 million. I want to live a life that I don't have to look in the bank or lose sleep over money, and I can do what I love. That's rich for me with the people I love. So my job isn't to give that to my son. My job is to teach my son how to get that for himself. I protect him, I get him. So my kids, for example, what they need and necessities, I pay for, naturally. But if they want extra sneakers or they want to go out to party, whatever, that's on them. They have to learn that discipline to create the life they want. My son pays for his own studies. It's your job as a parent to pay for his studies. No, it's his job to pay for his studies if he wants to study. It's his investment. If he fails, it comes out of his pocket. Once he decides to progress his career further, whatever it is, I will then do what I can to provide for my son those opportunities. My job is to provide the opportunity, not to pay the bills. He's 18 years old. Obviously, it's slightly different when they're kids. I don't mean to put anyone down. We often lose sight of the fact that our job, it is, but our job isn't to really take care of our children. Our job is to teach them to take care of themselves.
Yes.
You know? And I think that's the one thing that men aren't being taught that. Women aren't being taught that. And I think in society, we're losing our way, and we are focusing on men and women and genders rather than focusing on you as a person. And I will show and love you for who you are. And you will love me for who I am, regardless of the pronouns you use, regardless of anything else. I can't force you to cater to my story. You can't force me to cater to yours. If we have a different story, wish you well on your journey. Mine's in a different direction. But I'm happy for you because your journey is going to bring good to the world, and my journey will bring good to the world in a different way. It's fine to be different as long as we focused on each other's humanity. But the moment we turn on each other and it's your job to be better, it's my job because I'm not providing for you, you need to catch it. We put in the responsibility on somebody else. So that's my pretty much opinion on that, man. Like, I don't think the issue here is women, and I don't think the issue here is men. I think the issue is how we see ourselves, and then we are at a point that we are searching for self-knowledge, but what's available out there can actually deter us from the reality. Again, we have to make the choice on how we use those tools.
Yes, yeah. I know you've got to shoot off soon, mate. I've got one more question for you.
Absolutely, mate.
And this is really good stuff, mate. You have such a wealth of wisdom and knowledge, and just the way you articulate yourself and break things down from a philosophical point of view. What has been the biggest turning point for you in how it's made you who you are today, and what is it that you want to instill on others and to leave a legacy and help as many people along the way as possible?
Mate, I'm going to pretty much what I like with the I Alpha podcast. I'm hoping to get people connected to their inner alpha. And to do that is learning to be challenged without being offended. And when we do that, it's not saying that we don't want things from other people, but we can give them to ourselves. We want to be understood, but we're not putting an effort in being understood. And if we want to be understood, what's the first thing we need to do? We need to understand. So in order to get our perspectives, I want to understand you, and only once I understand you can then I communicate in a better way in order to be understood. And when I do that, I'm learning more about you, and I'm indirectly learning more about me. The more I learn about me, the more powerful and stronger and accepting I become of myself. And the more I learn about you, the more empathetic and compassionate I become towards you. We all have our own story. And I think that's going to bring us closer to ourselves. And the closer we get to ourselves, the more we resonate with one another as humans. That would be what I would want to teach. Like, you know, no matter what situation, the world can give you the fucking worst hand. And if you feel shit about it, I believe it's still up to you to change the way you feel about it.
Yeah, that's
it's hard. It's hard to accept, but that's the reality.
Yeah, that's some really, really great advice, and I think, yeah, it sort of paints a narrative on, you know, we're not perfect. There is always going to be ups and downs in our life, and it's how we can figure out a way to navigate through the problems, because problems are going to arise no matter what. So yeah, that was really well said, man.
Mate, I think that's reminding ourselves that every time there's a problem, I don't use the word problem anymore. I actually got this from the IALPA course. I use the word project.
Yep.
If you say I have a problem at work versus I have a project at work, it changes your energy.
Yes.
So I've opened myself up to better solutions. Learning those tools is going to bring more out in me and create a better life. So who was responsible for switching those words? I was. And when and giving people these tools, I believe then we get better at becoming who we naturally want to be. And it's very, very hard when someone's really hurt us. It's always going to be better if they fix us, but we need to learn to fix ourselves as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and that's powerful for me. That means you're self-established, you're a kid, and we need problems. We need them. Honestly, we need these challenges, because without these challenges, we're not going to grow and learn. Without the 200 kilos on legs on squats, your legs aren't going to grow. Yeah. Without rolling with a good guy, you're not going to get better. we need these challenges. We need to be okay with failing. We need to be okay about putting ourselves in these uncomfortable situations, because that's where change happens,
Yeah.
not
And
through
that
distraction.
obviously, and the byproduct of that is it leads to fulfillment and joy. And some of the most memorable moments in my life has come as a result of going through adversity, going through struggle and hardship, because of the amount of work that's required to get to that end point. I feel such a sense of fulfillment and gratitude and joy. Like it
Mate,
was interesting.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And you're very unique. Even when you prepped for your competition, you were doing it for you. And that's because you chose to voluntarily put yourself in the situation to challenge yourself. Some people will put themselves in the situation in order to get attention from competing. They know they're going to be challenged, but that wasn't the root reason subconsciously. So I think you're going to get a lot more out of all your projects when you accepted that that project is there for you to learn something
yeah.
about you.
It's so counterintuitive. And you and I both come from the gym. We're in the world of bodybuilding and weight training, and there are many days when I don't feel like working out. Probably
Oh, mate.
80% of the time, I don't feel like working out. But when I do, I get in there and I always work out, but I feel so much better after. And it's going through struggle. It's going through, as you said, voluntary adversity, putting
Yeah.
yourself in uncomfortable positions and challenging yourself, that really does give you that sense of pride and appreciation and fulfillment of what you've just done, whether it be an ice bath or a grueling leg session, or whether it be slapping and bumping hands on the mat with a high level jiu-jitsu black belt. These are all things that really are the byproduct to making us feel happier within ourselves.
Mate, absolutely. And you just also hit the nail on the head, like I had heard, and I won't say what area of the brain it is because I'd be lying, I don't remember, but there's a portion of your brain that actually improves every time you do something you don't feel like doing.
Yeah,
I don't feel like prepping my meal, but I do. There's that portion of my brain that develops. And the more that this area develops, the more resilient I become physiologically in tough situations.
yeah,
And it's something that that you like. If you do an ice bath all the time and then you enjoy it, it doesn't work anymore. So those little things, and that's a really good trick as well. Every time you don't feel like doing something,
do it.
that's when you're going to get a better return on your
Yeah.
investment.
I call it ignoring my inner bitch.
Nice.
Yeah, ignoring my inner bitch. Like I've done the ice bars, I've done the cold showers, and I've got to be honest, I've done numerous ice bars now. I never feel like doing one,
No,
but
I
I know
hate it, mate. Yeah, I'm the same.
it fucking sucks. But
Yeah,
it's the aftermath. You really feel that sense of aura and
and you're
that
in
dopamine
charge.
rush.
You're in
Yeah,
charge of your brain, of your body. You tell it what to do, not the other way around.
yeah,
And I use a different way. I say I get double my investment. I get double
yeah,
return. Because if I feel like going to
yes,
the gym, I'm gonna get 50% back. But when I don't feel like going to the gym and I go, I'm gonna get 100, way more back. So
yeah.
you're always gonna get more out of doing things you don't want to do.
Voluntary adversity. I think
I love
that's,
that.
yeah, voluntary adversity, putting yourself in uncomfortable positions, whether it be lifting weights or doing an ice bath and things like
Yeah.
that.
With the
Yeah,
intention of carrying them out with dignity, you know,
yes,
with
yeah,
that intention, with the intention of being better after it.
yeah,
And I think that's the secret, man.
yeah. Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure sitting down with you, Peds.
Oh, mate, thank
And
you so much for having me.
Nah, man, I really appreciate it. And what a remarkable person you are, mate, and what you've overcome and how you've navigated your way through life, and what you're doing now is pretty remarkable. Just before you go, mate, tell us a little bit with what's happening with you with iAlpha and what's been happening with that.
Mate, iAlpha Project is something that I've had on the back burner for a few years. I ran Global Life and I'm a personal trainer, but more of a cognitive trainer. So I use personal training to change people's mindsets. So I work with people with disability, rehab, as well as competitive athletes. And even though the science behind it all is adequate, the biggest changes is when you start shifting their mindsets, and these challenges create the right environment for it. The I Alpha project was always something that I had on the back burner, that I wanted to share all the tools that I have learned. And I'm nowhere near was born this way. It just came with lots of practice, lots of awareness, lots of learning. So I just figured just amalgamating everything together, but the common factor is the same. It always comes down to self. And it applies. So that's what the I Alpha project is. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and a YouTube channel as well. And obviously I'm on Instagram and TikTok as Wolf Pepper.
Love that, mate. Nah, that's fantastic. Awesome, mate. Nah, thanks again, Peds.
Thank you so much for having me, man. All right. Thank you, bud. Bye.
Okay. See you, mate. Bye.